I didn't do anything, but
Okay. Welcome back. We are now live again. Man, you see what happens. You get rid of Chad. You start prefer sides, and he comes in and
sabotages everything.
totally sabotages your show. And accidentally ended the live stream there. But we are back, part B, version 2.0. We're going to continue to keep it going. Andy, I don't want to waste any more time and get us off schedule. I'm going to kick it right to actually a really fun interview. And it's not so much DFS or gambling related, but I spoke to Steve Scott, who competed in the USA, and wanted to talk to him just about how unique the experience is and how cool I think it is that the premier event, essentially in a sport, allows amateurs to come and play alongside. Like, can you imagine just regular guys out of the local YMCA going to play in the NBA Finals? That's kind of what you get at Augusta National, and Steve's got a little bit more info. Here he is. Fascinated by the aspect of a professional sport allowing amateurs to play in basically their premier event every year. So I wanted to bring on someone and ask them some questions who's actually done it before. I have with me today Steve Scott, former #1 ranked amateur player in the world, PGA Tour teaching pro. You'll see him live on the coverage with the PGA Tour. Now, Steve, thank you so much for joining me. I greatly appreciate it. How are you, sir?
Well, glad to connect with you, Joe.
Absolutely. Yeah. So let's dig right into it. I'm going to set the stage, Steve. And I know that you've told this a million times, but some of my audience may not have heard it before. So let me just set the stage for everyone real quick. 1996, U.S. Amateur Championship at Pumpkin Ridge in outside of Portland, Oregon.
Yep.
You're a 19-year-old sophomore, Florida boy, just like me, out of the University of Florida. You head cross country. It starts out with, I believe, 312 players, right? Everyone's competing in a traditional stroke play event. Top 64 qualify for match play. You win, Steve, the first 5 matches. You get to the 36-hole finale, all the way 2 holes to play. You've got a little bit of a lead. You're on the putting green. Just tell everyone sort of what happens next and how it has sort of changed the rest of your life. In what way?
There's really maybe one guy that could have beat me that day, and he was the one who turned out to be, arguably the greatest player of our generation in Tiger. So it was an amazing day, but the epic moment. I mean, the match went 38 holes, but the epic moment of the match was on the 34th hole when Tiger was going to play from the wrong spot, and I had asked him to move his mark over, and I made a par putt, forcing him to make his birdie putt to win the hole outright. And he was going to play from the wrong spot, and because I love playing by the spirit of the game, like so many golfers around the world do. It was kind of one of those things. I told Tiger, hey, you got to move it back, and it was a pretty crucial moment in golf history, and hopefully everybody who plays the game would have done that. But I've had a lot of people tell me over the years that maybe they wouldn't have. And so anyway, it's he moved it back, and then he holed a long putt on the next hole to tie the match, and then he won on the 38th hole. But the moment right there was really highlights what the greatness of the game is all about. And
Sure.
for me to be in that moment and have that transpire like it did, it was a pretty special thing, despite not taking home the victory that day.
When you're up 5 after 18, I assume there's some sort of like a little breather for lunch or something like that before you come back out. Did you have a sense at that point of what Tiger Woods was at the moment and how great? I obviously didn't know maybe he was going to be like he is, but was he such a force and enigma in the golf world at that point?
Yeah, completely. I mean, he had won 3 U.S. juniors in a row and then 2 U.S. amateurs in a row to that point. And nobody had won 3 straight U.S. amateurs in the history of the game. And for me to be the only guy that he was up against to stop that history, basically, it was a pretty monumental day. And I mean, I knew he was going to do something in the second 18, and
Yeah,
he came out and I forced him to pull off these miraculous shots that ultimately he just kept on doing, throughout his career. He turns pro the next day. Hello World, the whole thing. We remember that in Milwaukee, and he
that
was
was a
off
couple
and
days
running.
later, right?
And he won. Yeah, he turned pro right after we played. I was the last amateur match he ever played, and he wins 2 events that fall on tour, and then wins the Masters 8 months later, and turns the golf world on its head. And and it was pretty amazing that it transpired in that small of a time window right after we played.
Well, one positive that I know you can definitely draw from it all was a few months later, you received an invitation in the mail. Talk to me about like what that feeling was, opening it up and seeing an invite to the following Masters.
Well, I was hoping that it would be coming, and it did. You definitely have to get invited. It's not an automatic entry, and but yeah, the moment to get that, and I think, I mean, I felt like I would get going into that final match. I think that's what gave me the freedom to go and play as well as I did,
Huh.
because the two finalists in that U.S. Amateur get to the Masters, and so I mean, I guess I kind of knew I would get in, but until it shows up on your doorstep, you're never quite sure. But it's a super special moment to receive that, and know that, yeah, you're going to be able to go and play some practice rounds beforehand, and experience the Masters. I mean, there's plenty of players who play the PGA Tour, without a victory, who will never experience what I experienced driving down Magnolia Lane and playing in the Masters, 1997. I mean, been 25 years. I really can't believe it.
Yeah, I know it's going back a little bit in 25 years, but just kind of walk me through what the experience was like a little bit pulling into the Masters, right? For the first time, you're an amateur, you're still a teenager at the time. Who are you with? What are you driving? Like, how do you know where to park and where to get in? And like, what's the situation like just driving up there for the first time? Were you nervous?
Yeah, sure, certainly. I mean, I'd gone there about a month before and played a few practice rounds, and
Okay.
so I kind of knew where things were. But at the same time, I came straight from a collegiate event in northern Georgia, and I drove up there, and then I drove over to Augusta, and kind of had this beat up Honda Civic, and it was funny. I pull in, Sunday night before the Masters week, and I pull in about 9 o'clock, and I had to show them my ID, and they kind of couldn't believe that. Okay, well, I don't know. I kind of couldn't believe that I was there, and didn't
Yeah.
get the full picture of Magnolia Lane until the next day, until the sun came back out. But I got there, and one of the assistant pros at the time, a guy named Doug Mauch, showed me up to the Crow's Nest. I got to stay in the Crow's Nest a few nights until my family came in, and I mean, to stay on the grounds of Augusta National before Masters Week, and it was pretty. It was just electric. I mean, it was kind of like you're a kid on Christmas Eve.
So the crow's nest, I'm not sure how many people that may be watching this understand it. So it's and tell me if I'm getting this wrong. It's basically an upstairs within the clubhouse at Augusta National that they invite the amateurs competing for the week to stay in. Is that correct?
That's exactly right.
Were you there alone, or were other guys with you?
Yeah, I actually was there alone that week. It was kind of weird because Tiger turned pro, and
Yeah.
the Mid-Am champ, and the British Amateur champ. They were both Mid-Am. They were both probably in their 30s or 40s, and so they had family, I think, with them, and so they didn't stay. And yeah, it was kind of weird to stay there. I stayed there for 2 nights, and yeah, it's pretty outrageous to do that. Go sneak down in the champions locker room at 11 o'clock at night and realize Jack Nicklaus only has one green jacket, not six, and um, just yeah. I mean, just to be able to do that. I mean, one thing really cool that maybe not a lot of people know of is that there are really no menus at Augusta National. You just basically tell them what you want, and they make it. And so that's a pretty cool thing too to experience. But everybody's so friendly, so welcoming. Just the time of my life.
So you mentioned that you got to play a practice round with Jack. Like, how does that come about? Are you just kind of on the grounds, or are you approaching guys on the range like, hey, do you mind if I hop on and be a fourth here with you guys today, or sort of how does that come about?
Well, it was something that was arranged well ahead of time. I
Okay.
I, I wrote my college coach at the University of Florida suggested that if there was somebody that I wanted to play with, that I write them a letter. And this is before emails and before really most technology that connects you like that. So yeah, I wrote him a letter, and it took Mr. Nicholas a while to write back. He was busy in January or whatever. He writes back in early February. It probably had gone by for 4, 5, 6 weeks and at least. And yeah, I just said, here, connect with my my secretary, and she'll set everything up. And we played in Tuesday afternoon practice round after he flew in that morning. But yeah, it's just amazing that all those players agreed to play with me in a practice round. And yeah, it made the experience pretty unbelievable.
So you get to first tee on Thursday. Most nervous you've ever been over a tee shot, or how are you feeling coming in? You really had nothing to lose, kind of, right?
Yeah, I wasn't playing that well. I didn't have a lot of
Okay.
good control of my ball, and so I wish I was playing better. And that's what I wish. But yeah, I just didn't quite have my game. But yeah, I was pretty nervous for that fact. I kind of blocked my tee shot right at the fairway bunker, and I hit it in the trees. But I had an alleyway, and I hit a 9-iron up there on the green, and I 2-putted for par, and I was on my way. But yeah, it's too cool. But yeah, it's amazing when you're nervous and your adrenaline starts pumping, how much your heart can just totally beat out of your chest.
Was it surreal in any way for you to think, a couple of months ago, I had this guy on the ropes, and now he's out here. Obviously, he wins the 97 Masters by, what was it, 12 strokes? Was it in any way, like, what was that like watching that sort of happen from your angle?
I mean, pretty unbelievable. I think what he did on the front nine of that first round when he went out and shot 40 at the Masters there, I mean, and what he did going to that back nine to shoot 30, and that's what I experienced when I played it. He flipped a switch better and faster than I've ever seen, and that's really been his hallmark. He was just able to turn bad or not so great play into great at just the drop of a hat, and that will always be something that I will remember. Because when he played, he was not playing well when we played. He did not play well in the morning 18 at all. I think he shot about 76 if it was stroke play, and the fact that he was able to come out and shoot basically a 65 in the second 18 at Pumpkin Ridge to tie me, just to tie.
Yeah.
I mean, pretty outrageous numbers.
When these amateurs show up here, is there a little pressure or to have a caddy, from Augusta who kind of knows the course better?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it might have helped a little bit in hindsight. The greens are very difficult to read.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah.
One of the guys, a guy who was actually the co-writer of my book, Hey Tiger, You Need to Move Your Mark Back. Just wrote that book last year, and my co-writer's name is Trip Bowden. He was the first white caddy at Augusta National back in the late 80s. And one phrase that I'll never forget that he said that you don't read the greens at Augusta, you remember them.
Well, your story just in general is I think such a testament to your character and admirable. Again, it's so amazing to me that such a premier event in a sport has amateurs invited, and they're competing with the best players in the world. As one of the few people, kind of before you leave me here, who have had the chance to do it, why is that experience so unique and special?
The Masters is just so, I mean, it has so much history. I mean, tying to the days of Bobby Jones and him creating the golf course and the club and who was a member there and the traditions that they have. And the amateur dinner is really special. We had an amateur dinner there on Tuesday night of the week, and to be able to do that and to have great champions, and like there was Charlie Coe and some great amateurs. It was almost like a pep rally for the amateurs. That they wanted us, because that was the spirit of Bobby Jones. I mean, he was a lifelong amateur. He wanted the amateurs to succeed at the Masters, and so they always wanted to give the amateurs a great feeling that, hey, they can have a chance to go and win it. And so that was the special thing, really, that I'll remember.
Such a cool story. I genuinely appreciate you for
Mhm.
taking some time out of your busy
Mhm.
week and out of the studio this week, Steve.
Mhm.
Tell our audience sort of where they can find you, where they can find your book. Do you have a website or anything like that that they can learn a little bit more about you and your story?
Yeah, for sure. You can go on movethatback.com and I will personally sign a book and send it to you. I'm fulfilling all those orders and happy to do that. You can also get it on Amazon, but I won't sign it for you. And you can check me out on social media at SScottPGA on Instagram and Twitter.
It's the spirit of golf,
Mhm.
and your ability to sort of embody that at 19 years old is so impressive to me. I thank you for joining me here today. I hope you all enjoyed this segment. We'll catch you next time. Thanks, Steve. Here we go. Another edition of the Player Spotlight segment. This time, actually, I wanted to bring this up, Ben. The very first guest on Preferred Lines, now a recurring guest, Mr. Ben Coley. Welcome to the show. And you're going to do a Player Spotlight on someone you're excited to talk about, Justin Thomas. How are you, sir?
I'm very well, thank you, and I'm glad to see. Yeah, look at you. 2 years down the line, you got this lovely setup behind you. It's all good, and good on you. Yeah, this is a great idea you've got. So I'm looking forward to making the case.
Thanks a ton. Yeah. So here's how we're kind of going to roll. I'm going to give you the floor. Let us know your thoughts, just incoming, I guess, a little bit on the recent form coming into the Masters for JT.
Yeah, so I mean, I think the number one thing I would say about the Masters is there's this fascinating dynamic which I'm excited to see how it plays out, and there's no guarantee it'll play out the way I think it will, but the dynamic is experience versus the brazenness of youth. And in golf today, it's the youth that are winning. Like, it does not matter if you go to a place where you're supposed to be experienced, like Joaquin Neiman, for instance, at Riviera. You're not really supposed to win at the Riv, sorry, as I'm supposed to call it, that early in your career and in that style, but people can do it now. Scotty Scheffler winning 3 times in 5 weeks. There's no let up for these guys. Colin Morikawa winning on his Open Championship debut because he figured something out that made him a links golfer in 5 days. It's just, they're so good at learning. But Augusta, I think, still requires patience and a little bit of a learning curve. Now, there are exceptions to every rule, right? Jordan Spieth nearly won it on his first go. Will Zalatoris could easily have won it on his first go. So I'm sure at some stage we will see a debut champion for the first time since 1979. But for now, I think you just have to rein yourself in a bit and say to yourself, look, all these new guys with their flashy profiles who've been here a couple of times before, even their brilliance may be shackled a little bit by a lack of experience. And that all leads me back to JT. He's playing here for the 7th time. That's kind of perfect. I mean, Hideki took 10, DJ took 10, and I think we're in the golden years now for JT. These next 4 or 5 years are when he wants to be becoming a Masters champion. I think it's the golden age for him at Augusta. In terms of his form, obviously he's been playing really well. He's hit the ball really well at the Valspar. He hit the ball brilliantly in Phoenix. Could easily have won that. But actually, what I really like is that we've seen just that little uptick in his putting. I think coming out of Phoenix, he ranked 175th on the PGA Tour in strokes gained putting. He's up to 99th. Now, obviously, you want to see a little bit more than that still, but it's a really important step forward. And if you can take that with him to Augusta, where all the stats tell you nobody's hit it like him really over the last couple of years. If he has really found something on the greens, I don't see anybody who's got the better game for this test. So Justin Thomas, Masters champion 2022, please let it be.
How much do you think the inclusion of Bones on the bag may help him potentially this year at Augusta?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that I think we're probably, and particularly people like me, I'm probably, as anyone who reads my stuff, like I don't know. One of the things I love about sport is the emotional side of it, the narrative, for want of a better word. And I probably am a bit of a sucker for it sometimes. But I think we've seen a very explicit example this year. I mean, look at Scotty Scheffler with Ted Scott on the bag. Now, I'm not disrespecting the guy before him, and it doesn't always work this way. But obviously, Ted Scott could be a big asset for Scotty at Augusta. Given what he's achieved there with Bubba, but Bones, I really think if there's going to be one tournament where it does help JT, it has to be this one. Obviously, a 3-time winner here with Mickelson, but the thing I really like, and it's something that Thomas has spoken of before. He has struggled, certainly in his first few years. He felt he had to play defensively. And the thing that makes Justin Thomas one of the best golfers on the planet is that he's aggressive, and that he trusts himself to hit those iron shots pin high. And we see it week in, week out, everywhere else he plays. At the Masters, despite some really good tee to green stats, he says he just has felt a little bit shackled, and he's been trying to convince himself to just be him. And if you need sort of a backup there, something to really give you confidence to be the player you are the other 51 weeks of the year, then why not be, a caddy who's been there and done it? And it always makes me think of this. I wish I could attribute the quote, because I don't know where I heard it once, but I remember seeing an interview with Bones, and he was asked, do you think Phil would have won more if he'd been a bit less aggressive? And Bones's reply was, no, other people would win more if they were like Phil. He thinks he sees golfers who are not willing to back themselves to go and take on the shots, like the famous shot Phil hit from the trees on 13, like the shot he hit to the 17th green when he won the Open Championship, which I think Bones would say is the best shot he's ever seen, the bravest shot he's ever seen. JT now should feel absolute confidence. And look, he didn't have a mug on the bag before, did he? But now we've got Bones, and I think in terms of the Augusta caddy hierarchy, there's no one higher. So yeah, I think it has to be a help.
If you could, Ben, if you could create a path that would most lead to him putting on a green jacket, what would it be? Is it a quick start? Is it just blowing the field away with iron play? Like, what does he really need to do, in your opinion, to come through this year?
Yeah, I mean, I think really you want a quick start, and we've seen him win tournaments from the front. It's a long way from a Sony Open, but Open 59 there, and they never saw which way he went. So I would like to see him get off to a good start, because I think when you do find yourself perhaps needing those Friday moves, and he's made some good Friday moves, certainly in the November edition where he was the favorite at halfway, as he was last year. Despite being sixth through 36 holes, he has made good Friday moves. But I think for me, what I actually more specifically, I would like to see him get off to a good start and really take care of that back nine on Thursday, because it's caused him one or two problems in the past. I remember, the November edition, he was looking great and he dunked a wedge into the water on 13, and it really derailed him. And I think, if you were to have a criticism of his profile as a player, obviously he's a major champion, and there are many players towards the top of this market who are not. But Thomas, since winning a major, has been very disappointing in them. There's no doubt about that. And I think he has at times struggled to deal with the setbacks you suffer. And so I suppose the best way to avoid answering that concern would be not to suffer any setbacks, but obviously it doesn't go like that. So yeah, I think we need to see him play that back nine well on Thursday. That would be the ideal start for me. If he can do that, whether it's 2, 3, 4, 5 under par on day one, I think you could have the foundations for a really special week.
Final question, Ben, and I have to ask this, but do you think the inclusion of his great friend Tiger Woods being in the field as of now has any effect, positive or negative, on how you feel about JT's chances this week?
I think if he gets grouped with him, you could argue that might be a negative, although he's got a brilliant record playing with Tiger. He generally gives Tiger a bit of a schooling when they play together. I don't know is the answer, and we'll find out. But I will say it has to be a positive that he got to play 18 holes with him earlier this week. How many people get the benefit of that? I dare say they'll play together again on Monday, Tuesday, whatever Tiger feels he can manage in practice. And I do think as well, Tiger is very much a sort of avuncular figure now on the PGA Tour. I think this idea of, you'll hear it in the next few days, Tiger doesn't enter a tournament unless he feels he can win. I don't think that's true. I don't think Tiger Woods deep down, if he plays the Masters next week, really feels he is a likely winner of the tournament. And if he can't win it, no doubt the person he'd like to win it would be JT. And I think he's certainly at a stage now where all of the wisdom he's built up here over the years, he's going to impart that. If Tiger plays 2 rounds, misses the cut, and JT's in the mix on Saturday, the first person texting JT with words of advice will be Tiger Woods. And that's very much what happened back in 2017 at Quail Hollow. So, yeah, look, as you can tell, I could argue a very positive, flawless case for JT. I know there are some negatives, there are some questions to answer, but having the Tiger Woods factor, I think, is a net positive, certainly.
What an honor. What a case built for Justin Thomas next week at the Masters. At Ben Coley Golf on Twitter. Please check out his player-by-player preview for next week. He puts a ton of effort into it, and it is one of the best things that you will read all week. Thank you for joining us, Ben. We greatly appreciate it. Best of luck next week.
Very kind of you. Thank you very much. And
There you have it. The case for Justin Thomas, a guy that you are fond of, Andy. So, Andy, listen, we just crossed in terms of total content now 3 total hours over the last 2 nights in 3 different live streams. We thought it was going to be 2, but it ended up turning into 3 different
Shout
live
out
streams.
Chad.
16 guests, and I think we may have saved the best for last. And I'm excited for this because you and I are kind of flipping the script here, and we get to play the host role and bring on America's golf host, the content king himself. Welcome to the Major Report, Rick Gehman. What's up, buddy?
What's going on, guys? I am obviously excited to be here, but you're right. I am a little uncomfortable on this side of things, to be honest with you.
Comfy pairing, though, for all of us, I would say, because you guys do your show together. Me and Rick talk twice a week now on the Scramble, but we've never done it, the 3 of us.
Yeah, it's definitely comfy, right? If this was the tee sheet that came out on a Tuesday morning, I think we'd all be pretty happy with the results.
Okay, so that's a great segue, and it also kind of talks a little bit. I want to talk a little bit about what Ben kind of ended on there. The tee sheet did come out, right? Let's talk a little Justin Thomas, because I think that he got an interesting draw. Not only is he with an amateur, not only is he with Hideki, who I think has serious potential withdrawal concerns, but he's in the group right behind Tiger Woods, Rick. How do you think this may affect Justin Thomas this week, potentially positively or negatively?
I'm not sure it has all that much of an effect on him, quite honestly. I mean, he is around the Tiger ethos. Ben was all over it. I mean, these guys are constantly talking to one another. I do not think the large crowds in the area are going to bother Justin Thomas. He plays with them on a regular basis. And let's be real. I mean, playing with Hideki Matsuyama, that's a circus in its own right, especially when you've got the guy who gave Japan this massive Masters victory, and now he's going back to defend. I guess there's a comfortability with Hideki's an easy guy to play with. You know, he's not going to talk your ear off. He's not going to get in your way. And then, of course, you have the top James Piot in that group as well. I mean, I don't think there would be a bad pairing for Justin Thomas really anywhere on the board.
In terms of like the final decisions that you have to make, Rick, whether it be for your betting card or your DraftKings lineups, like what more do you need to see tomorrow? Are you waiting on something with the weather? Do you want to hear more press conferences? Were there any press conferences today that you watched and were like, this is alarming to me, this stood out to me? Like, where do you stand on Tuesday night?
Yeah, I'm pretty much done, I think. Obviously, I'm going to keep an eye on the weather. I think there's a real risk, especially when pricing comes out as early as it does, to talk yourself into circles, right? And we're already seeing it with, ownership is already shifting and will continue to shift just a little bit more. Like the first run of ownership for a lot of people, Scotty Scheffler was one of the most popular plays. Now that's been cut in half. You're just seeing kind of the trends and the ebbs and flows over a longer period of time. So I don't want to get caught in a situation where I'm overthinking this. I'm aware of the guys that I'm warm on. Nothing is probably going to change for me. If there is something drastic that we see kind of with the weather report, maybe I make a little bit of a move, but I'm pretty comfortable with where I'm at on a Tuesday night. And I don't want to get too crazy with things.
Let's play a little bit of the hypothetical game for a second on the weather. It looks like it's supposed to thunderstorm basically all day tomorrow. It rained today, canceled sometimes. Let's just say we get all that rain that's expected, and we have ourselves a newly lengthened Augusta National that is potentially soaking wet. Any guys that you think that is helpful for, and any guys that you think that's hurtful for?
Yeah, so I kind of think there's 2 paths to this, and Andy's been all over this all week, and we've talked about this as well. It's going to say 7,500 yards on the scorecard. It's probably going to play much longer than that, and I think distance is really going to be a big attribute this week. So you look at guys that carry the ball very far. Well, I mean, like Rory McIlroy's name comes to the top of the list. If you want to look for guys further down the board, Cam Young, Cam Champ's like been objectively horrible, and I would never play him, but he's got a pretty good record around this place, and you get to roll him out there as one of the longest drivers on the PGA Tour. Like that's much more exciting on a wet, soggy Augusta National, and that's what we're going to get. So I think that's one path. You could make a case, and I'd love to get your guys' opinion on this. I'm not as excited about it, but the longer it plays, you could get yourself into some situations where wedge play, kind of maybe the par fives, which aren't always going to be gettable in wetter conditions, or if you don't hit a great drive, you're now having to lay up in some spots. I don't love like the little wedgy guys from like 100 yards in as much as I just want pure bombers the longer this thing gets.
Yeah, I was actually kind of thinking about that too. And I was just talking to somebody that was there on the grounds, and he said it got dumped on. And it continues to get dumped on. And the early weather reports so far have been true, where we knew that there was going to be this 12-hour rainfall from about midday Tuesday to in the middle of the night on Wednesday evening. We could get into a situation as we stand like on Tuesday night now where it plays really, really soft on like Thursday and Friday. And then you kind of start to see on Saturday, it starts to firm up just a little bit. We're going to get some wind. So I think that's going to help with it. And then by Sunday, it's just absolutely supposed to be pristine conditions. I don't know. What do you think, Joe? Is it throwing you off your game a lot? Like, are you waiting on more weather news or anything like that?
Yeah, I'm going to see what it does tomorrow. I have some guys in mind, and you did a great job of it earlier previewing as well in terms of guys that kind of hit a higher ball flight and have carry distance really is what's important. So there's a lot of guys that hit it lower and we'll roll it out there, but I think the carry distance is definitely going to play an important factor this week if it does play as soft as many are sort of forecasting at this point.
Yeah, makes sense.
Let's play a little game here, and I got one that I'm excited to talk about at the end, but this has been more of a sort of a DraftKings focused show here on sort of part B. So let's go kind of around the horn here. We'll start with you, our guest, Rick, and the guy that you're playing that's like sneaky, that nobody else is playing, that you're going to put in your lineups and be way overweight on in terms of field ownership.
Okay, so I think I've probably galaxy brained myself into Taylor Gooch at this point, which is
I like that.
Objectively, when pricing came out, it was clear he's $1,000 too expensive. I get it. But what it's creating is a situation where his ownership is so low, and the fact that we are getting the Tiger, I don't know if it's new, the confirmation that he's going to play, like whatever ownership Tiger Woods sucks up in the $8,000 range comes away from guys like Taylor Gooch and like Sam Burns and like Sung J M, that type of situation. And I like these guys that drive the ball further than they do accurate, right? Like longer than they are accurate. I think Gooch's biggest weakness is not as big of a deal here off the tee where he kind of sprays it a little bit. And I think his biggest strength is magnified a little bit. He never three putts. So we've got an awkward situation with the pricing and with the ownership, but I'm actually now almost willing to pay $1,000 more than I should for the completely low owned Taylor Gooch.
Yeah, I love that one too. I talked about that a little bit on my Sunday show, where it's like, okay, he is the most mispriced player on the slate. But at the same time, if I was building a golf course for Taylor Gooch, bent grass where you can be a little bit wild off the tee, long iron play, like this would be it. The guy for me that I had no expectation of playing before the week started, but just running through ownership, like there's a chance that Sergio's like 4%, which is a little crazy to me, right? That may force my hand a little bit to have some Sergio shares. Like it's not like Sergio's been playing bad golf lately. And I think for some reason, everyone is just passing him up for Matthew Fitzpatrick, which I completely understand, by the way, but he's kind of in this strange dead zone with like Tommy Fleetwood, who I also really like and am going to play. But Sergio, I haven't heard anyone talk about him yet. And I think that's because since winning the Masters, he has not been good at major championships, but it's not like he's incapable clearly. So I think my hand has been forced a little bit. And as we sit here on Tuesday afternoon, I may add some 4% Sergio to my shares.
Okay, here's my guy.
Yeah.
He's in the 10K range, and we had two guys on earlier in the show. Pretty much everyone you asked who they're fading in the 10K range. The majority of people are coming up with one name, and it's Viktor Hovland. And I'm going to make a case for him here. Yeah. Of the guys over 10K since November, there's 6 wins on that board. 3 of them come from Scotty Scheffler in terms of professional tournaments. 3 of them come from Vic Hovland. The other guys haven't won. So the incoming form is good. I also am still of the belief that since November, he's the best driver of the golf ball on the planet. He's high, he carries it far, he's straight. He hits almost 65% of fairways, which is pretty wild from a guy who averages between like 307 and 310 off the tee. Where's he struggle, and where's everyone coming up with the case to fade Viktor Hovland? Strokes gain around the green. Here's my position on it, and I'm not going to make the case that he's good there. I just don't think he's nearly as bad as everyone is making it out to be, because where are you getting those stats? Are those 3 wins, all 3 of them, the Hero World Challenge, Mayakoba, the win over in Dubai, are any of those stats factored into any of these strokes gain around the green models? No. So you are not pulling anything from any of his 3 victories in the last 5 months. Further, so I dug a little bit deeper into his strokes gain around the green numbers. Where is he losing them, right? It's not really chipping, scrambling from the fringe, and these are PGA on PGAtour.com in terms of the 2021-2022 season, basically the start at the Fortinet and on. He's 22 for 22 scrambling from the fringe. Number 1 on the PGA Tour, 100% scrambling from the fringe. Scrambling from the rough, he's 38 of 54, 70%. That ranks 9th on the PGA Tour. Where he's getting absolutely crushed is the bunkers.
Yeah.
He's losing. I have him 18 of 51.
Looks like I know.
Yeah, 18 of 51 from the bunker, which is 206, which is, I think, maybe not enough of a sample size to just diminish him that poorly around the green. Keep in mind, he essentially won the Hero World Challenge out of chipping out of a bunker. He would have gained a ton of strokes there when he made eagle. I just think it's a little bit overblown. I went and looked at his European Tour stats out of the bunker. Get this, in 2022, he's 62%. He's 39th on the European Tour in terms of sand states. All of 2021, all of his starts on the European Tour, he was 62%. The average on the European Tour was 52%. He was in the top 40 that year as well. So I just don't think he's quite as bad around the green as the stat models are indicating here. And he's been incredible on approach. He's been incredible off the tee, all that stuff. And you can potentially get him, the only guy in this range, sub 10%. I'm going to be all there on Viktor Hovland. And I think it gives you a ton of flexibility. There's so many good guys in the 9s and the high 8s. If you want to play them, it's tough to fit them in with Scheffler, Rahm, JT. It's much easier when you go down to Vic. What do you guys think there?
I think that even if you say, okay, he's like objectively the worst, like short, or I don't even want to say short game because he's a pretty good putter, like around the green player in this area, he still piles up top 10s, right? Like Andy, that's the floor when you hit the ball from the ball striking categories like Viktor does, is like you can be bad and still finish inside the top 10.
Yeah, I think, there's always that one player that scares you the most where entering the tournament, you're like, I'm just like, there's this alternate universe where everything I thought pre-tournament is just completely wrong. And it kind of happened with Viktor a little bit at the Players too, because that was another tournament where I had this theory about how I didn't like him on Pete Dye courses. And of course he gains about a casual 14 strokes ball striking and dispels that theory. Yes. So I talked about how I'm taking this giant stand about long iron play and driving distance and carry distance and apex height and all that stuff. Hovland fits that mold to a T, right? Hovland is perfect in that category. My problem with short game, the retort that I would give is that I think that it's more difficult. Augusta National is more, you're going to be faced with a higher degree of difficulty of chip shots than he would at any other course on the PGA Tour. And that's just what scares me a little bit, is that I don't even think that the degree of difficulty at chipping at any of those, I know it wasn't tough at the Hero. At Players is fine. Arnold Palmer a little bit harder, but you even get that thick rough that is easier for most pros, will tell you, than the tight lies that you get at Augusta, chipping to undulating greens, to greens that run 14 miles per hour on a stimp. That's my only concern, is that the degree of difficulty at Augusta is too far of a bridge for him to climb. With that being said, can he win the Masters losing strokes around the green? Yes.
Yeah.
He probably can.
Probably.
Yeah. So
There's a path. There's a path for a lot of guys. All right. Let me ask you this, Rick.
Mhm.
Say you have nothing on your betting card right now. The odds are what they are. You walk into the beautiful Circa Sportsbook where you and your lovely wife love to frequent. You got $100 in your pocket. You can put it down on one player to win the Masters. Who's it going to be?
See, this is kind of like a risk question, right? Like how much risk am I willing to take on? Should I just bet it on Justin Thomas, or should I bet it on the guy that I think is like objectively the best for his number? I was pretty intrigued with Joaquin Niemann for a while this week. I mean, the comp courses and kind of the high ceiling, and then I saw he was playing with Tiger, and I absolutely hated it. I am not. I'm going to take the value side. That's the angle that I'm going to take here. I don't hate Gary Woodland, right?
Yeah.
Like. There is, and I'm not a Gary Woodland guy. So for me to be in this position where I look and say, okay, there's 10 guys that what I would define as like hit it far and are also gaining strokes over the last like 40 rounds. Gary Woodland's one of those guys, averaging like 310 off the tee. It's in like the top 10 of guys that hit it at least 310 and gain like a half a stroke per round. The ball striking version of Gary Woodland's back. I worry that he doesn't have a great history around Augusta National, but I look at odds like depending on where you're looking, like anywhere from 60 to 80 to 1 on a guy who's won a major championship, and we're seeing like a real life resurgence here. It's got my full attention. Let's put it that way.
You know, I heard someone say somewhere earlier this week that the reason why Gary Woodland doesn't play well at Augusta is because he doesn't hit the ball high. And I went down this dark rabbit hole trying to figure out if that was true. And the conclusion that I came to is that Gary Woodland can hit the ball plenty high if he needs to. He just, a lot of the time on the PGA Tour courses that he plays, he likes playing that low stinger off the tee, which really screws a lot of his apex stats and his driving distance stats and all that stuff. So I'm with you. I think Gary Woodland at 6,900, the course history will keep the ownership somewhat quelled, I would say. But the way he's playing right now, I don't think there's any reason why he can't contend.
Yeah, I like that a lot as well. You are 100% spot on. I think that Gary Woodland can do things with a golf ball that are just magical that not many people can do. I mean, he can hit the fade, he can hit the draw. He has typically got that thing on a string, and he's hitting it exactly how he wants to. The guy for me, it's simple, guys. It's Brooks. I mean, look, I want to hear from you, Rick, because I got a text from you about a week ago. And a lot of people, actually, you aren't the only one. A ton of people texted me over the last month, Brooks is winning the Masters. Brooks is going to win the Masters. When you see him play well, it's Brooks is going to win the Masters. But I don't feel like anyone still holds that take quite as strong this week. He's still sitting there at 20 to 1. Do you still feel as strongly about it?
Absolutely. So there's two things that are really hard to identify with Brooks because he plays a lot of his stuff close to the vest. One is like how interested he is in the golf tournament, and two is how healthy is he. And they're incredibly difficult to quantify. Well, you've got a major championship, so we know he's ratcheted up for that, right? 16 top 10s in 30 trips, and he probably should have won this in 2019, and he's been close a handful of other times. And I'll tell you what, guys, looks healthy. A healthy Brooks has not played a lot of events in the last 2 years. I think we've got a healthy Brooks. The advanced metrics, his stat profile looks much more in line with versions that have contended at major championships last summer. Just like put the puzzle pieces together, and it feels like a Brooksy week.
And I'm not as high on Brooks as you guys are, but one thing that I wanted to ask you guys and say is, I think he's going to be he's definitely a very popular bet in our community, and he's going to be a very popular DraftKings play in our community. But in terms of like the general consensus on Brooks, in terms of like, did you guys see him on the media schedule today? Like I don't think I even heard him get an interview.
It is bizarre that there's just so many guys. So I think like outside of our circles, there's not a lot of necessarily Brooks interest this week, which might be keeping those, those casual $10, $20, $50 bets out of Brooks's column when they go to sports books. So yeah, it is interesting. I think there's a pretty big difference between the way we treat Brooks and the way everybody else is treating Brooks.
That's interesting that you bring that up, Andy, because if anybody pays attention to sort of what's blowing around in the media the week of a major and likes to use that as a little bit of fuel, I think it's him. I can remember him at Shinnecock Hills in that media room. There was only 3-4 people there, and he was defending U.S. Open champion, feeling extremely slighted. And he said that fired him up for the week. I can remember him using comments on Live from the Masters from Brandel Chambly a few years ago and taking that and tweeting something out the night before, and then ended up finishing second to Tiger that year. He may be able to utilize that as a little bit of fuel, and there's nobody better with a little gas in the tank on major weekends than Brooks.
I just want to say one more thing now that we're down the interview rabbit hole.
Yeah.
You know who is another guy that actually in our community is definitely getting less run than Brooks, definitely going to be lower owned than Brooks, that gave an interview today that I was like, oh man, this guy is really freaking focused. And that was Rahm, who gave, he gave this interview today. And I was like, oh man, like not trying to play like armchair psychologist, read between the lines, body language doctor, but he just looked locked in and focused. And I thought about a quote that Colin Morikawa gave earlier this week where he was like, we know everything. We hear everything. I knew that if I won the Hero World Challenge, I would be world number one. Mm-hmm. I think Rahm, I don't know what Rahm has to do to overtake Scheffler as world number one, but I will say that I put a healthy wager on Rahm over Scheffler in a matchup.
So two things. They definitely hear everything. There have been times where it's like, oh, you said X, Y, and Z, like that got to that guy. And it's like, because somebody on their team listens to whatever podcast you're on, like they hear everything. The other thing about Jon Rahm, I have never seen, and like me being on the grounds for like peak Tiger Woods, like that didn't happen. I've never seen someone so focused like Jon Rahm, right? Like inside the ropes with him at Torrey Pines, that guy, he did not like, it was 1,000-yard stare, like directly in front, never broke, nothing got to him. And on Sunday, those crowds got huge over there. It's really a sight to see. And he's like that the second he steps on the grounds. It's like, it's very impressive.
Yeah, and it's interesting because this week, and he's been the king of DraftKings, the king of betting boards, the king of Jock Market for so long, as you know, Rick. Right. He was overtaken. Scheffler's the highest priced guy. He feels like he's being a little bit overlooked. He could come in like let's say he comes in 12, 14%. You have to like him in that type of environment.
I certainly do. Yeah. I think if Rahm is anywhere around 15%, I think it's a steal.
Yeah, the situation I don't want to get into is that he's the second most expensive golfer and chalky. But right, if we could get him, sub 15, closer to 12, it's like, he's got 4 top 10s in a row. And 3 weeks ago, we thought he was the best player on the planet by a wide margin. Like we're not that far off from that.
Yeah.
We aren't that far off from the start of this thing either, and we're going to see one Tiger Woods going for his 6th green jacket this week. Rick, you, me, and Andy have been talking about this story and this storyline for a long time now. As we sit here Tuesday night, obviously he's playing. I think more and more people are feeling better about how he looks, how he may feel physically. What's a realistic, let's say, projection in terms of where you think he's going to finish this week? If you could set an over-under on finishing position.
49.5 is like where I'm coming in at right now. I'm quite excited for Tiger, right? I'm pretty sure he's been hoodwinking all of us on how good he's been playing for a long time. I mean, back in December, he was at the tour average ball speed. That was in December. Now, that was 171 miles an hour. We know today he was at 174. When you get in competition, it's probably 175, 176. So he is like above average in terms of ball speed. He's got all the short game shots. We know that. I imagine the most likely scenario is plays well or well enough round 1, plays well enough round 2, makes the cut. I think there are probably a couple of sloppy bogeys and doubles in there just because he's got to knock off the competitive rust, and there's going to be things that he's going to have to do. And then I do wonder, as the weekend comes on and he's into day 2 and 3 in a row and 4 in a row, if it starts to get a lot more difficult for him to get warmed up and cooled down and all that stuff. So I've bet real American dollars, Joe, as you know, on him making the cut. I believe that is a reasonably likely outcome. And then I think he probably fades on the weekend instead of charging on the weekend.
You know, for me, like, and I was cooler on him than both of you guys heading in. I think I've started to warm up a little bit more, just as I'm just intrigued by him as a DraftKings play. Like, I'm not quite there yet, but I can't put my finger on what the ownership is going to be yet. We just talked to a bunch of really smart DFS guys, and they were talking about how they think it's going to be single digits, and I must be way off on that, because I thought it would be something completely else. I'm kind of like warming up to him in terms of finding a good market to play him. I think the only thing that's holding me back is I wish he was on the other side of the draw, because I think Friday is supposed to be the windiest, and I Friday afternoon. And I wish that I wish he was getting out early on Thursday morning, because Thursday morning is going to be, or sorry, I wish he was not having to get out Friday afternoon when it's firmer and super windy.
So I thought about that, but the like this is the split he wants, right? Like the Thursday, Friday afternoon for the body. Like this is the split that he wants. He might run into the worst of it, but I'm trying to figure out like what's more important here. Trying to get Tiger going Thursday afternoon, Friday morning is devastating for the back, and he's gonna have to wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning anyway. It's like
a good point. Yeah,
I don't know how to quantify one versus the other.
No, that's a really good point. I didn't even think about that angle. I was thinking external, not internal.
Yeah, I think as soon as he showed up and committed to play, there was no way that whoever makes the tee times at Augusta was going to give him a late early.
Yeah, that was the market you wanted. That was the lock of the century, that he was going to get AM PM.
Yeah. What about, let's sort of shift gears here a little bit. What about this narrative that course history matters so much, and there's a couple of really solid debutants in the field? You mentioned one in Taylor Gooch. How much stock do you put in that? It feels to me, Rick, like someone's ready to break the mold. We've seen it close the last couple of years. Who would be the most likely candidate in this instance to potentially break that mold, and since Fuzzy Zoeller be the first debutant to win?
Yeah, so I think there's two things at play here. Course history is definitely a real thing. You can back it up with data. It's a very, very sticky course because we play the same time every year. It's the same course, and you generally get a small field with the same guys in it. So that's part one. The whole like nobody's won since Fuzzy Zoeller in their debut, like it's kind of random, right? I mean, Will Zalatoris almost did it. Jordan Spieth almost did it. Sung J M almost did it. Guys play well in their debut, even if they don't win. So I think that is a little bit overblown. It's not like these guys are completely lost and forget how to play golf when they get there. I think the most likely candidate is probably Sam Burns, right? He's the modern golfer with 3 wins in his last 12 months. If you go further down the board for a week like this, Cam Young, super interesting. Andy, he bombs it and played well at Riviera. We like that as a comp. Like if you want a little bit of value for a debutante, like how about Cam Young?
Yeah, I like that as well. You know, the last thing that I'll say on this too is we were talking to Feinberg about this a little bit earlier, but I just think that this crop of young players needs to be analyzed a little bit differently than previous crops of young players that we've seen. I just think with the technology, with all the advances in coaching and fitness, I just think that you have guys like Sam Burns, as you talk about, Rick, all the time, where it's like, this is the modern golfer. And I think the modern golfer, A, is very well suited for Augusta National, and B, probably is going to have an easier time figuring these places out just based on talent alone.
Yeah, these guys have teams now, right? They've got teams of people to help them get acclimated to every course on the PGA Tour. We used to say it's like the 10th time you get to Augusta National, you start to figure it out. That number is going to get smaller and smaller and smaller. These guys are too good. Technology's too good, and all the information is there for them.
These guys are good. What an honor for you to join us, Rick. We really appreciate you stopping in, man. A ton of fun. Tell everyone, plug your stuff. Tell everyone where they can find all of your tremendous golf content this week for the Masters.
Yeah, ideally. So if you like data and visuals, rickrungood.com is the place to be. And then, of course, my YouTube channel is Rick Run Good, and Twitter is, you guessed it, Rick Run Good. That's where you can find all this stuff.
My man, I'll see you tomorrow night. Thanks, buddy.
All right. Thanks,
See you, Rick. Thanks, my friend.
Andy, That's about all we got, man. Nearing the 3.5 hour mark in terms of total content. If you are still with us, thank you so much. Thank you to you, Andy. Like, I know I sort of signed you onto this gig that pays you $0 for 4 hours dedicated of your time. So thank you for having a little bit of faith in me on this. And I couldn't think of a better person to sort of sit alongside and talk golf for Masters Week.
Anytime you need me, man, dude, it was an easy decision. It was a blast. You put together an incredible guest list that I could spend hours talking to. So I hope people enjoyed it. It will be on our audio feeds again, probably by the morning. And yeah, check those out. If you share the show, all that good stuff. I thought it was a blast, man.
Yeah, 17 guests. The two of us hosting the entire time. It was a lot of work. Thank you all. The way that you can sort of pay us and reward us for this is just a simple thumbs up, a like, share it with a friend. It was totally a blast to do this. So thank you all for checking out the Major Report. Like Andy said, what we're going to do is, since we had a little bit of an interruption, we're going to splice together the two audio feeds. We'll make sure that that's posted not only to the Inside Golf Podcast audio feed that's available on iTunes and Spotify, but the preferred lines as well. Like and subscribe to those shows at Andy Lack. It is ADP Lack Sports on Twitter, right?
You got it, man. Yep.
That's the handle to check him out. Mine is at Tour Picks. I am Joe Idoni. That is Andy Lack. We are signing off 2 days later from the Major Report. Best of luck to everyone this week and enjoy the Masters.